Hi, my name is Steve Williams. I'm a realtor with Solid Rock Realty in Ontario, Canada. I serve the Parry Sound, Muskoka region and surrounding area. And today I'm going to talk about what a buyer experience might be like in a seller's market. We've just gone through a pandemic and are just starting to come out kind of on the other side of it, but it is still very much a seller's market. So you may be looking at buying a house, a cottage, investment property, whatever it is that you're looking at buying. It can be a really daunting task in a seller's market to not know exactly what's going to happen during a seller's market. So today I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the beginning process and how you should get started, and then what the offer process might be like and how you can get a competitive advantage against other buyers so that you may win a house, cottage, or investment, whatever you're looking at purchasing. So the first thing you should start with is to get a pre-approval. So I'm going to just create a little document here for us as we go along so that we have kind of the steps here. So the first one is to get a pre-approval. So the biggest thing here about a pre-approval is that obviously when you're looking at budgeting, you're going to want to know that you can afford whatever the house is that you're going in at, and whatever your maximum amount is. Maybe the bank or the broker or whatever will tell you that you can afford $1 million, let's just say, for example, but you don't want to spend $1 million. You don't want to afford $1 million. You've gone through the document process and $1 million is just way too much for you. You're more comfortable with, let's say, 500,000. So let's just say your pre-approval, for the sake of this video, is 500,000, and that's the most you're willing to go to. You don't want to go above this, despite you being pre-approved for $1 million. So what does a pre-approval first mean? Let's just talk about that. A pre-approval is an approval basically that the bank or a broker is getting you based on certain conditions. So with your job status, with the down payment that you're offering, with certain your credit rating, that sort of thing, whatever the qualifications are that the certain lender is looking at, they're giving you a pre-approval based on that criteria. What that means is that when you are looking at a particular property, it does not guarantee you funds. This is just a pre-approval telling you, based on your whatever criteria it was, this is how much they would be willing to go up to. Now, that means that when you actually go in on a property, you actually need to get an approval for that specific property, which is a commitment of funds. And until you get a letter of commitment from the bank, the pre-approval actually doesn't mean much. It's just an assessment at the beginning of, this is how much we think you can get based on the information that you've given me. So I say that because as I'm going to be talking about conditions and clauses and stuff that you may want to add to protect you, this is something to keep in mind, because in a seller's market, you may have heard, and a lot of people are waiving conditions, which is a scary thing. If you are waiving a condition because you have a pre-approval, you actually do not have a commitment letter from the bank. So you could be waiving a condition that you actually need as part of your purchase. So just be really careful as we progress here, and get actual counsel from the professional like the bank, and just say, hey, what am I looking at getting here? Like, what does this pre-approval exactly mean? And when can I get that letter of commitment? And he'll or she will talk to you, kind of going through, when you're actually, like, the stages and how it works. Okay, so once we have this pre-approval, so assuming that you have a pre-approval for 500,000 is what you want to go to, you're willing to, the bank has given you basically the go-ahead, this is what you can afford up to. The next step is to find a real estate representative. So once you've chosen a realtor to work with and you've signed a buyer representation agreement, that realtor is working in your best interest. So what that means is that they're trying to negotiate the best deal for you. They're looking for properties according to what you need. And one of the things that you're going to want to do with this realtor is obviously sit down and have a conversation and talk about needs and wants. So how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms? Do you want a pool? Do you want a fireplace? How much acreage do you want? What kind of roof? Do you want a garage? Do you want a shed? Now, those are basics. Those are things that if you go to a website, you could generally specify and it will kind of populate those sort of things. But one of the great things about talking to a professional is that oftentimes when they look at pictures or things like that online, they're able to determine things just from looking at it really quick. What if they may be seeing things that they've seen a lot of times in different houses or whatever it is, or maybe they've even been to that house or houses on that street and are aware of different issues. It's really important that you deal with someone in your region that lives in the region, especially like, for example, I live in the Muskoka area and a lot of people want to buy cottages here that live in Toronto or surrounding areas. And then they'll get a realtor that works in Toronto and try and show a property, for example, in Bracebridge or Huntsville or wherever it is, and they have no idea anything about any of the roads, any of the lakes, the flooding issues, the traffic. Is this place open all year round? Is there access? Does the municipality plow the roads? Does the municipality collect garbage? Is there a dump somewhere I have to go drop this stuff off at? So these are types of questions that, depending on the area where you are, if you're in Toronto, you're going to want a Toronto representative because they know that area, they know that market, they know how to negotiate for you. So I just really encourage you to kind of do your due diligence when you're looking for a representative. Just ensure that they especially live in the area and know quite a bit about the area. So another thing too that I would really strongly recommend, and this could happen even before you start your look with a realtor, is sit down with whoever it is, if it's your partner or family or whoever, and make a list of things that are deal breakers for you. So for example, maybe you're someone that's really handy and you like to have a workshop. So a workshop could be a garage or a shed or whatever it is, but that is a deal breaker if it's not on the property. You don't want that property. So that would be an important thing to pass along to your representative. Different people have different requirements or deal breakers. So maybe you love spruce trees or weeping willows or something like that. And if there's none on the property or around, you don't want the property because you just love the type of birds or whatever it is that come with that type of tree. So just be really clear and concise and know, we want a lot of windows, or we hate windows, whatever it is, whatever the deal breakers are. It's really helpful for your representative to be able to look in your best interest and find what you want. Now, when it comes to a property, so let's say that we've now find the property. Okay, so we've looked, we've gone and done a bunch of showings at different properties, and now with your representative, you've discussed that you are interested in a property. So what happens? Well, in a seller's market, it's a little different than in a balanced or a buyer's market. So a seller's market is a market where the demand exceeds the supply. So that means that there's not as much inventory as there are people looking to purchase. So if you go to a store and you're trying to purchase something and they're out of stock, that would be similar to this, where the properties are the inventory and the buyers are going to try and purchase properties, but there's just not enough stock. And what happens in a world like that, in a seller's market, is a lot of the power shifts to the sellers. So in order for you to be competitive, you have to know what happens during these offers. And it's a very interesting world when you're going into this as a buyer trying to get a competitive advantage. So there's a few different ways that you can do that. So we're just going to talk about pros versus cons. Now, I would never tell anyone, actually. I would never tell anyone to, as I said at the beginning of the video, to delete a condition. It's a scary thing when you delete a condition. For example, like I talked at the beginning, maybe you think because you have a pre-approval letter that you can delete the financing condition and you're good to go. Well, as I described, that is not the case. A pre-approval is not a letter of commitment from the bank. So you better be sure before you consider deleting a condition that you are able to get financing, as an example. With inspections, I would always recommend to get an inspection, like an inspection on the home. If there's a fireplace that doesn't have a wet certification, you're going to want to get a wet certification or a wet inspection. If there's a septic on it or a well, you're going to want to do potable water test on the well. You're going to want to test the septic to see if it can hold the amount of people that are going to be living in the house. You don't know, maybe you don't even know what the size is. If you have 4 people moving in and that septic was made for 2 or 3, it could be problematic in the future. So it's very, very scary thing when you start to remove conditions. Now, having said that, in a seller's market, often people, to make their offers more competitive, are removing conditions simply because to a seller, a condition might be seen as a con. Again, I repeat that as a buyer, you want to protect yourself. You want to protect your family. You want to protect your purchase. You want to protect your financial situation, your livelihood, your family situation. So just be really careful when you're removing these conditions. You need to be really, really diligent in your calculations and make sure that everything kind of suits. Let's say that you're going to remove a septic system. Well, septic systems can be very expensive. So if you're going to remove a condition for inspecting the septic, then you need to be comfortable that if there's something wrong with that septic, you're going to be able to fix it. You have the cash to actually do that. So just be really careful and diligent in removing these conditions. Even though they are seen as cons to the seller, perhaps you absolutely need these in there to protect yourself. So let's move on to the pros. If there are quote-unquote cons, as far as the seller sees it, then you're going to want to add as many pros as you can. So a few examples of pros would be, well, let's just say the closing date. So an example of this, let's say that you want to move for June 1st, okay? But the seller really wants to close on May 1st. So if you end up doing a May 1st purchase, you actually may have bridge financing for a month, which means that you have 2 mortgages that you have to cover. Because if you're going to take possession of the new house May 1st and keep your other one until June 1st, well, there's a month there where you have 2 mortgages, and it may not even be possible for you to get approved on 2 mortgages for that. So that's something to really look into. But a closing date can be a huge pro, because maybe they're in the same situation where they would need to get bridge financing and they're not capable of doing that. So that could be a real benefit to adding a closing date that suits the seller. And you can have your agent speak with the seller agent and ask what's the suitable date. Oftentimes it's actually even in the listing where they have their preferred date of moving. So that's a pro. Another one would be price. And this is an interesting thing with the price because a lot of people will ask, or be concerned about, well, I don't want to overpay. Okay, so let's just say that, for example, we are looking at a property that is listed at $400,000, and you're comfortable with going up to $500,000. The seller doesn't know that, obviously. Only the buying agent knows that, and they're working in your best interest to negotiate the best price for you. The best, not just the best price, but the best contract. Okay, so what do you do in a situation like this where it's listed for $400,000? Well, I mean, there's a lot to consider here. So if you improve the price, this can be seen as a pro. If you keep it at list, well, that's what they're asking. So technically, isn't that what they want? Well, when you're in a seller's market, let's say that there's 8 offers that come in. If everyone is listed at $400,000, it is all at the same price, except one. and one is at $420,000, for example. They all have similar conditions, similar closing dates. The seller is most likely going to take the one that's a little bit more money, especially if all of the other conditions and everything are the same, and the only difference is price. So this is an area where you can kind of play around with to give yourself a bit of a competitive advantage. But again, listen to your representative and them helping you do a comparative market analysis where, they look at different homes that have sold in the area similar to the one that you're looking at with the same property size, types of property, number of bedrooms, garage, blah, blah, blah. And just ensure that you're comfortable with this price. Okay, so as you're going into looking at doing an offer, so we're at the offer time, or offer stage, let's call it offer stage. What can end up happening is, so let's just take, for example, the seller wants a presentation time on, let's do April 1st, 2022 at 1 p.m. And they say that they want no preemptive offers. Okay, so what this means is that even if they get an offer, even if there's an offer that is registered on the property, so some buyer sends an offer through their agent to the seller's agent, let's say on March 30th, the irrevocable date, which I'll talk about in a second, is before April 1st at 1 p.m. So if the offer came in before the date, it would actually not even be presented to the seller because that's their instructions that they don't want to look at any preemptive offers. So it's obviously in your best interest to have your agent look at the attached documents to ensure that they know what the seller's wishes are and if a preemptive offer is even allowed. So what is a preemptive offer? Well, it can also be called a bully offer. And if the seller has not instructed their selling agent to not accept preemptive offers, you are actually able to go in with an offer before, in this particular case, April 1st at 1 p.m. Now, there's something called an irrevocable date. Irrevocable date. And what the irrevocable date is the time that you give as the buyer, or it can work both ways, but in this case, you're giving the offer. So you, the buyer, are giving an irrevocable date to the seller of a particular time and date that they have to decide if they want to accept, counter, or reject your offer. Those are the three options. So if you create an irrevocable time and date that is before the presentation time, in this case of April 1st at 1 p.m. So let's say, for example, we put the irrevocable time and date of March 31st at 8 p.m. What that would mean is that when you send in your offer, it becomes null and void after 8 p.m. March 31st. So the seller has to make a choice whether they're going to accept, counter, or reject your offer before 8 p.m. on the day before presentation time. So that's why it's called a bully offer. You're going in preemptively, kind of bullying the seller. People don't like to use the word bullying, but it is technically kind of putting them in a position where it's like you're holding them against a wall, rock in a hard place or whatever, because you're making them decide before the offer date. Now, this can be an interesting strategy because even if they reject you at 8 p.m., technically you could go back in with another offer for the presentation time if you were still interested. So let's say that they don't respond to you, they ignore your offer, and which is essentially a rejection because after 8 p.m. it becomes null and void. So then you'd have to create a new offer. Okay, so let's talk about the presentation time. Let's just assume that they've ignored your offer, they didn't accept it, so they want to go to the presentation time and see what happens. So what happens in the presentation time? Well, the requirement from the seller's agent is that as offers are coming in, they have to reveal to anyone that has a registered offer how many other offers are on the property. So for example, let's say at 9 p.m., because your agent said, well, I'd like to know if there's other offers on this property. The seller says, well, I'm expecting 3 offers by the morning. Okay, that doesn't mean that there's necessarily an offer on it, because they haven't said that there are offers. They said we're expecting offers, 3 other offers. And your agent could say, well, you can expect 1 from us too. So then they'd be expecting 4 offers. So come the morning, the agent continues to update and says, okay, well, I now have 3 offers on the property. So you as the buyer have already signed an agreement, a new one. You talked about putting your price, let's say at $400,000, which is list. But now there's 3 offers on the property. You've already signed this document. You've created a new irrevocable date. Let's say that we did, for the new one, we did at 6 p.m. Let's do 6 p.m. April 1st, 2022. So that is giving them 5 hours after the presentation to make a decision, which is normal. That's fine. And you went in at 400,000. Okay. So, well, now that you've signed, you've given an irrevocable time. What happens? Even if your buyer agent already sent this to the seller agent, there is the opportunity to improve your offer. Now, what does that mean? So what that means is, for example, let's say that you don't want to change any of your conditions. You're comfortable with your conditions. You think that they'll accept the conditions. They're normal, financing and inspection, insurance, that kind of thing. But you do want to improve the price. So what happens is the offer that you've already signed, your agent would just cross out the price, the number, the numeric, and the alpha one, like the letters, and write in a new price. So let's say that you improved your price to, let's say, $425,000, and also improved deposit to, let's say, 10% instead of 5%. So they would actually cross out the deposit amount, change it, and you'd need to initial all of these. Anyone that's going to be on the contract, anyone that's originally on the contract, as the buyer, would need to sign all of these changes. Now, that was at 10 a.m. Frustratingly, at 12 o'clock, your agent tells you there's 4 more offers. Now we're up to 7 offers on the property. You haven't yet, or even if you did send your offer, you're like, man, there's 7 other offers. Goodness, what do we do? So you're the 8th offer. So you want to improve again. So you change it to 465,000. The same thing happens as before. Cross out the 425, cross out the deposit, and make the changes. You can do this basically right up until 1 p.m. and improve your offer. So then once the 1 p.m. comes around, the seller has until 6 p.m. Keep in mind, that's what your irrevocable time is, where they can either reject all offers, counter 1 offer, or accept 1 offer and reject the rest, okay? So after the reading, the seller's agent comes to your buyer agent and says, we really like your offer, but we're just wondering if you can do any better. They can say that to all of the offers if they wanted, keeping in mind that this is still in your irrevocable time, so you can't back out as the buyer. So they're kind of fishing for more. Will you give more? Well, you decide, okay, fine, another improvement, and you decide you're going to go right up to the 500,000 limit that you set for yourself, simply because you don't want to lose the property. Now, you will never know what other people are offering. Those other 7 offers, it is not allowed to disclose that information to anyone else other than the seller. So you're in a position where you may actually be bidding against yourself. So this is a tricky part here. One of the things that I really want to encourage as you're going through this process is to just look at the amount that you are willing to lose this property for. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that if you are looking at this property and this is the place for you, you just love it. If it's sold for $470, for example, before you put in this offer and they accepted someone for $470, you found this out obviously after you decided I'm not going to put in another improvement, and then it sold for $470. You technically lost this property for $5,000. Now, of course, this is speculative, right? You don't know what it's going to go for. Your agent doesn't know. It's impossible to tell. I just want to say that in a seller's market, you do really need to think about going in first and heavy with your best offer. This improvement, really, I mean, it's an okay thing to do. I'm just telling you what you can do, but realistically, you should go in with what you're willing to pay on this property right up front in a seller's market, because it's a difficult market. You need, as I said, you really need to protect yourself with your conditions and everything like that. But again, you know, just be comfortable. Be comfortable with what you're putting an offer in for. A very interesting thing when you're looking at offers like this is, you know, what are your long-term objectives here? Are you buying this for a flip, or are you buying this to live in? If you're going to be buying this for 5 to 10 years and you're looking at that question of, you know, did I overpay for this? Well, let's say that you did. Let's say that you did overpay by $50,000. I mean, what does that even mean? What does overpaying by $50,000 mean? Well, if the house to you is worth $500,000, then you didn't overpay. You paid exactly what you're willing to pay. You paid what you're willing to have this house for, and really, over time, real estate has traditionally appreciated. So, you know, if you're going to be in this for 5 or 10 years, longer, live there as your family home forever, whatever it is, what does it even mean to overpay? You know, so you really have to do kind of an assessment on yourself, looking at yourself and what that means to you. And what happens, you know, if you end up losing the property? You know, it's very devastating when you lose a property. You're looking at a place, you could see yourself living there. Maybe when you're walking around, you're like, okay, that'll be his room, that'll be her room, this will be the kids' room. You know, this will be my workshop, this will be the art room, this will be an office, whatever it is. You could see yourself living there. It becomes very frustrating. It's you know, almost tied to your heart. A very emotional time. The only thing I can really say in a seller's market is try not to get too attached, because it will happen. When there are 8 offers coming in, that means that there's 7 disappointed people, generally, assuming that the seller accepts one of the 8 offers. So that means that there's 7 people that are disappointed, including you, and then you're back out into the market with the other 7 people, back out into a seller's market where there's not enough inventory. So I can only encourage you that there is a house for you. If you lose this one, there'll be another, and just be patient. Be wise with your offer. I can't stress this enough, that when you are removing conditions, you really need to be wise about it, and be sure you know and understand what you're doing when you're removing a condition, and what the risks are, what the risk factors are, what the consequences of removing these conditions are, because it's a scary thing when you're removing conditions. The conditions are there to protect you as the buyer. They're there in your best interest. So yeah, just be really careful with the offer. Be really careful with removing those conditions. It's really in your best interest to have them. So yeah, just be wise with it. Talk it over with your agent and just ask what the risks are. Yeah. I would, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Please subscribe to my channel. I will constantly be updating it and putting in new interesting subjects, and I'll try and title them properly so it's easy to follow. Yeah. If you have any questions or are interested in the Muskoka, Parry Sound surrounding areas, my phone number is 705-955-2233. Feel free to text or call or visit my website. There's a contact form, and my website is dreammuskoka.ca. So thank you again, and good luck in your search.